Donald Trump seems to love AI art. If you look at the White House Twitter feed, and alongside Trump's Truth Social feed, you will increasingly find him posting images generated using generative AI of many different genres and many different styles, and yet always enthusiastically using these tools. So over the last, I only scrolled back through the account over the past, like few days, but on the 4th of May, Star Wars Day, we had a May the 4th post from Donald Trump in which he was pictured as, I will point out, a Sith Lord with the red lightsaber here, with two eagles sort of growing out his shoulders and the veiniest arm you have ever seen. We had him recently as the Pope, a fun reference to the fact that the Pope died, and the Catholic Church is in the process of, or is about to start the process of electing a new Supreme Pontiff, alongside probably being a comment on the fact that Pope Francis was maybe a bit more of a lefty than Donald Trump and his colleagues would like. We've had lo-fi MAGA to relax and study to. What's this sound like? This is just 46 hours of an AI image of Donald Trump signing executive orders. We've also had images like this, which, do I know for certain that this was AI generated? No, I'm fairly sure it is. There's just something about it. Something about the kind of I don't know if it's the thick lines on the outside. I'm not sure entirely what part of it is that just instantly gives off this is an AI art. And Donald Trump is not the only right-wing politician to embrace AI. In the UK, we've seen a lot of right-wing parties, whether it's Britain First, whether it's Reform, using AI imagery in their campaign materials, and also just in their kind of general social media posting. And this has got me thinking a lot about why Trump in particular, but also right-wing populists more broadly, seem to love AI art in quite the way that they do. And my first kind of port of call in doing so was an article written by a writer called Gareth Watkins in a UK publication called The New Socialist back in February, which described AI as the new aesthetic of fascism, and which kind of took a multiple angled approach to understanding this connection between right-wing politics and AI as things currently stand. One initial kind of point that Watkins makes simply being the fact that, Trumpism is also a kind of technofascism, right? The inauguration ceremony featured pride of place all of the various tech bosses from the biggest platforms. You see RFK here. RFK is behind Sundar Pichai, and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos as less important. And, you know, a lot of this is a reflection of the fact that social media and tech more broadly is the new media space in a way that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, newspapers and TV would have very much fulfilled this role. And also, I mean, as Senator Blue has said in the chat, alongside this, we've also seen a broader shift to the right in Silicon Valley more generally. If we think of Palantir, for example, the company founded by Peter Thiel and now run by, I forget the name of the Palantir CEO, but you know, Palantir is one of the kind of biggest tech companies in Silicon Valley at the moment, and is very much a right-wing company. It views that kind of fusion of private enterprise, big data, and the power of the state as a positive. The website might open with the fact that it's proud to serve the NHS, but it also works to help militaries succeed in their goals of, you know, killing people. And in actual fact, the idea that Palantir might be getting the data from the NHS, but be getting patient data from the NHS is incredibly worrying. Another angle to all of this, which I think is kind of on the kind of fairly obvious reason that some right-wingers, Donald Trump included, might like AI art, is that, you know, it is the go-to medium of being able to create alternative facts, right? If you think back to that very first, those very first few weeks of the Trump administration, the first time around, and, you know, Sean Spicer giving alternative facts, you know, Kellyanne Conway going on the TV. AI allows you to do that. You know, if you have a sense that there are illegal immigrants who are doing crimes, right? Finding evidence of that can sometimes be tricky, right? Not because it doesn't happen, but because, you know, you've got to go out and you've got to find newspaper articles. If you want to use an image, you might have to pay to use the image, even if you're just tweeting it. You know, if you want to make sure it's correct, you've got to verify it. Oh, yawn, boring, right? If you just whack up Grok or ChatGPT or Stable Diffusion, whatever it is, Midjourney, well, you can simply say, generate me an image of illegal migrants doing crimes, please, and it will feed that back to you. And you can kind of feel like you've got a vibe that this thing is happening out there. However, you no longer have to actually go out and look for like a real example of it happening, because you don't need to, right? You can generate an image that shows it happening anyway. I mean, look at this. Like, are there images of people being deported by going onto planes? Yeah, probably. But maybe none of those images would be obvious enough or cruel enough or striking enough for Trump to use in an image. But that doesn't matter, right? Because you can generate one, and suddenly it can look how you want it to look. And then there's so much that can be said that is much deeper about this. Senator Blue saying in the chat, do right-wingers have a shortage of real artists? Silent Starly was saying, you know, maybe one of the reasons that Donald Trump and others like AI art is because no good artist is also on the far right. And this is something that, if we go back to that article by Gareth Watkins that he goes into as well. He talks about, back in the past, there were right-wing artists who were right-wing in their politics and yet could also create art which was like stylistically good, even if that politics seeped into that message, and even if their politics seeped into the art, and therefore you might disagree with the message of the art, or even if those things were separate, you could still say that there is a formal, there is something about the art formally which is interesting and is accomplished, I guess, is the way to say that. One thing Watkins points to is the fact that for many decades now, right-wing commentators, people on the right, have been decidedly anti-art, right? University departments which teach art or art criticism or literature or literary criticism or any of these things have been viewed as the enemy. If you think to a book like Dinesh D'Souza wrote a book some decades ago now called Illiberal Education, which was about how, universities were becoming too much about race and gender and whatnot. And this kind of seems almost passé, this idea now, right? Because right-wing politics has just been on that thing of university education has been brainwashing young people or whatever for so long that we've kind of just, people who aren't on the right, but also people on the right, have come to accept the idea that to be on the right is to be anti-university education, but also, by extension, kind of anti-art, right? You regularly see people on Twitter complaining about what they call modern art. You just constantly see tweets like this of just someone who is doing some form of contemporary art, which, whoever it is that is seeing it is, doesn't sort of get or doesn't want to interrogate in any way, and sort of going oh yeah, all art now completely sucks, right? And I think it is completely acceptable to not like an individual piece of art. However, it's always interesting to know that note that these are very often these very short clips of something, which, yes, out of context, this very much looks like I don't know what this is. And yet my response to seeing something like that is to go, oh, I sort of wonder what it might be. I'm intrigued to find out what the kind of intention is here and what people's interpretations of it are. I might still think it's bad and boring and rubbish. I've seen plenty of art that I think is rubbish. I saw when I was in, I think it was Barcelona. Me and my wife went to Barcelona and we booked tickets for some flamenco. And when we got there, it turned out it was sort of deconstructed flamenco. It was this very I don't know, modern or postmodern version of it, and it was rubbish. It was boring. I did not enjoy it at all. It was terrible. However, inherent to all of this kind of discourse, which exists quite a lot, is this idea that, if you dislike one of if you see this and you think it doesn't instantly look like art, don't ask any further questions. It is terrible. Just don't inquire. Never, don't dig any deeper. The other thing is to say well, if this thing is bad, that means all modern art is bad. You couldn't possibly learn anything from it. And the third is to say that there either is or should be kind of hard limits to what art is, right? That there are clear boundaries, and that probably art is, like good art, is something which represents the world in a very direct way, and that good art is, in that regard, not too creative, right? The implication is that one can be too creative and therefore break out the boundaries of art, and that actually we should be kind of limited. And that kind of attitude, as a couple of people have pointed out in the chat, I think has led to a situation where there just is this political affinity between being artistic and creative and being liberal or on the left, because art just isn't celebrated on the right at all. The right is often very anti-art, and so I think that creates a kind of clear, you know, if you are a creative artistic person, your politics are going to go in one direction. Stargarden says, oh lord, what a topic, art studies major here. Miss Effect saying art requires thinking outside the box. Yeah, I think there's some aspect to it there. But I think what's intriguing is that conservative complaints about modern art also kind of broadly extend into a skepticism about all art, even though they don't mention that. Because I think when there's discussion like about something like this, whatever this particular performance is, like there's one reading of it where you go like, oh, so they must love going and seeing a Michelangelo or a Da Vinci or whatever. But actually there often isn't a concurrent celebration of that work. It's just complaining about this. Sampunk Tom says, because back then everything was better and culture is declining, brackets, because of the immigrants. Yeah, but there's also, but it's more about complaining about the modern thing than it is about actually celebrating the old thing, right? A lot of the people that, you know, complain that, you know, white authors have been cancelled or whatever because, I don't know, I think there was a story in the UK some years ago about a university or a school that had decided to take Of Mice and Men off the reading list so that they could make space for an author of colour. And that's, you know, not taking it off because Of Mice and Men is bad. It's taking it off because there's only so much time and they wanted to diversify the curriculum a little bit. And of course, you know, a bunch of right-wingers complain about that. But are those same people going away and reading Of Mice and Men and loving it? I'm not so sure. And so I think there is also that practical reason as to why contemporary right-wingers like Trump are so keen on AI art, is that, yeah, they don't have the artists, right? Something that Watkins mentions is that, you know, he points to the futurists who were right-wing artists back in the early 20th century who became quite linked with the Italian fascists in Italy, I was about to say, but of course. And there aren't really contemporary right-wing artists. Like, I guess maybe you would, like, maybe Angel Studios, which is the sort of evangelical Christian film company which recently made the film about like Jesus but told by Charles Dickens, and makes oh my goodness, it also has a TV version of the Tuttle Twins, which incredibly is a cartoon series in which cartoons try to teach children about right-wing economics. So you get the inflation monster, And you get wonky wages, which is about how it's good that people don't get paid the same. Free speech freestyle. Like, you can kind of... so if you, like, go away and read the book and just look up the books, if you have a moment. There's a book called The Road to Serfdom, which is an adaptation of Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, as in like SERFDOM, but it's called The Road to Serfdom SURFDOM, and it's like about why roads should be built by private companies. My point was that, yeah, there aren't a huge amount of right-wing artists out there, and those that do exist aren't super creative. They're certainly not like form pushing, right? So something like, this was a pretty big deal, this film. The cast has like Oscar Isaacs, has a bunch of other people in it. Like, it's a star-studded cast effectively just telling the story of Jesus. There's huge money put into it. And that, yet you watch it and you just go like, it looks awful. Like, it sort of reminds you of kind of DreamWorks, maybe, back at a time where they were just trying to recreate they were just kind of doing copycats of Pixar films. Yeah, maybe awful is pushing it, but like uninspired, I think it's fair to say. I read one review that said that every single character looks like they're from a slightly different animation, which I think is kind of fair. I mean, and I guess like the other example would be like maybe the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire have done a bunch of films these days, but those again there is a kind of, if you look at Terror on the Prairie, like, you watch the trailers for any of these and you're like, oh, I guess it's kind of The Revenant, or it's or it's like a cowboy film. It's not particularly aesthetically challenging or inspiring, and in fact that's kind of the goal. The goal is to be like, remember when films were good again. And from that perspective, the goal is anti-creative. And so that becomes another reason why right-wing politicians, right-wing people kind of love AI, is that it is it's in some regards all they've got. But I think there's another aspect to all of this, which I've been thinking about more and more in recent months, which kind of taps on to a lot of this stuff. So, I made a video which came out 10 days ago, apparently, about the end of postmodernism. And it's a bit of a recap of the postmodern panic of the mid-2010s. And also, it's a bit of a video which kind of seeks to ask the question, has postmodernism died? And if it has, why, how, and what do we think comes next? You may have seen this video, you may have not. It got very quickly demonetized or given like limited monetization by YouTube, and very much kind of hidden. So if you have not watched it, please do go and do that. I would appreciate that greatly. And one of the things I talk about in this video is this notion of metamodernism, which is kind of one idea for what we might argue has come after postmodernism. This is the idea that, so if broadly speaking, modernism is a mode of both artistic and political thought in which people really believed in stuff, right? So whether that's socialism or fascism or liberalism or anarchism or whatever else, people, either wrote or bought or read aloud manifestos, and they got really excited about it, and they sometimes wore outfits which went with that politics. They sometimes, did hand gestures, whether that's salutes or raised fists or whatever it might be. People made art that they really believed in and that they thought, this bit of art is going to change the world, or it's going to draw out emotions in people. And then towards the middle of the 20th century, that kind of took a bit of a tumble because, as I kind of explore in the video, there were all kinds of atrocities which happened as a result of people really believing in political ideology a lot, whether that's famines or genocides or the dropping of nuclear bombs. As a world, we kind of became a lot more skeptical of ideology. And around the same time, the invention of photography and video meant that the desire to try and create, that sort of really just changed art and pushed artists away from creating art that kind of believed in itself too much. And a lot of artists began to create art which questioned what art is. And so we have this real postmodern period in which there's this deep questioning of belief, whether that's the belief in art, whether that's or whether that's a belief in politics. And you can see, and to focus on politics, you really see that throughout the late 20th and early 21st century, that ideology becomes this terrible word. Like, no one has a political ideology. Everyone wants to distance themselves. They sort of everyone wants to be a centrist. Everyone wants to describe themselves as a centrist. And yet, that doesn't seem to have got us much further either. We still have a climate crisis. We still have economic inequality shooting up. We have housing crises. And so much of that seems to be a result of a complete running away from ideology. And so we find ourselves in the position where we know that too much ideology can be bad, but also no ideology can be bad. And what do you do with that? And the argument that we now live in a metamodern age kind of suggests, the argument goes that we're currently moving into a place where where a lot of people in society are kind of trying to combine those two things. So on the one hand, all of those failures of kind of centrist liberalism have pushed us to kind of want to believe in stuff again. And for some people that is socialism, for some people that is Trumpism, for some people that is other forms of far-right politics. And yet, we still retain a level of skepticism or embarrassment or cringiness about doing so. And I think this exists to a great extent on the left as well, but in the video I kind of really focus on the right, because I think a great example of this is Elon Musk doing his big salutes because in there you sort of have a desire to reclaim the enthusiasm and sincerity of a mid-century fascism, right? You kind of have that enthusiasm to go, oh yeah, remember when people were so into being far right that they did like salutes in the public square? Like, wasn't that cool, right? That's kind of partly what he's trying to do here. But also he's still kind of aware that doing so is cringe. And so we get Elon Musk kind of doing these salutes, but then also being like, kind of, did I? Who knows what? And then it sort of becomes this funny joke as well. And like, yeah, and so just to clarify, like, I really think that this is at the heart of modern fascism, or at least provides us a really useful lens to interrogating how modern fascism is expressed. That there is this sense of wanting to believe in the thing and yet kind of feeling embarrassed by it. And kind of wanting to do it in a funny way, but also being quite serious about it. I think this runs throughout Trump and others' use of AI art. So there's a couple of writers that have talked a lot about this notion of metamodernism. Metamodernism. This is Timotheus Vermeulen here. And there's a chap called Robin van der Acker, who they wrote an article together which kind of really sort of tries to outline this idea. And they kind of talk about metamodernism being this, not so much a combination of modernism and postmodernism, as kind of as a society, we're swinging back and forth between the two. You know, in one moment we want to be really serious and committed and sincere. The other we want everything to be ludicrous and fun and silly. And AI art allows right-wing politicians and others to do that in a very particular way. So we get this, which is, you know, in part a very silly image of Donald Trump. This is ludicrous in many regards. And yet it's still also trying to convey this kind of like strongman leader message, right? He is trying to be like, oh, this is silly and fun. It's Star Wars Day. Here's me as a Sith Lord. Ha ha ha. But he does also believe in the like, yeah, I'm a strong man. I am the Senate, right? Same here. The notion of presenting an image of Donald Trump as the Pope, that is obviously ludicrous. It's obviously also like a kind of cheeky, slightly offensive thing to be doing at a time when the Pope has died and the Catholic Church is searching for a new leader, right? This is pretty, I mean, I guess it's sacrilegious, right? In the kind of old school, very literal meaning of the term. And therefore all of this is very silly and ludicrous, but it's also expressing quite a genuine view on the idea that the next Pope should be right-wing, right? Steve Bannon and J.D. Vance, both allies of Donald Trump, are both Catholics who deeply disliked the previous Pope, and think that the kind of approach that the previous Pope took is wrong and should be, and that the Vatican should take a different track. So we get an image which is very silly, but is also has a serious tone to it. And like, this is one of the things that AI is particularly good at. If any of you have toyed around with AI tools, like, one of the quickest things to do to make something that is funny is to do, make me this in the style of this. So you might go, write me a haiku about, I don't know, a poo I did or something. Or you might go, write me the story of Monsters, Inc., but as though it was written by William Shakespeare. Like, and AI is, like, for all the things it's not very good at, which is quite a lot. It's not particularly good at giving you fact. It's not particularly, like, for a lot of things, it kind of just goes off the rails very quickly. But one thing it's very good at is doing something in a particular style. And so write me X in the style of Y, or draw me X in the style of Y, is a thing that it's very good at. And if you want to do something that is funny, then write something or draw something about X, a very serious thing, in the style of Y, a silly or comical or whatever thing, is a pretty good formula for a gag. And so in many ways, like, AI feels like the art form of metamodernism. It allows you to express very serious political views in a way that has this one foot in silliness. And particularly kind of like a metamodern right-wing politics. Because there's also, like, the final aspect of this, I think, is that there's this real separation. If there's been a real separation between left and right in terms of art, in terms of the political left embracing art and conservatives and right-wing people running away from it and ridiculing it and rejecting art over recent decades, I think the opposite has often been true of machines, right, and technology. That the right has generally embraced the potential of technology and machinery to kind of do good things for us, where the left has been a bit more skeptical. And this has particularly existed, this is something we've seen in particular around AI. There is clearly a path to a left-wing politics in which that isn't the case, right? In which we go, okay, well, yes, maybe technologies are used in bad ways now, but they could be differently or whatever. And as I was looking through some of these clips to prepare for today's stream, I couldn't help but think about that. The line from The Great Dictator, the Charlie Chaplin film, where he talks about machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. And there's something to that in these images, right? That, like, this is an AI being used to express a unique creative vision. This is like AI being used as a way of delegating creativity and therefore, I don't know, in a way that feels very inhuman. I think it kind of makes sense that Donald Trump in particular, but also right-wingers more broadly, like AI, because I don't know, it kind of feels like the two things are very much tied together. Thank you so much for watching this clip from my Monday night live stream. If you'd like to watch more clips from the stream, both ad and sponsor free, then you can do so over on my premium streaming service, Nebula, where you can also watch all of my videos from the main channel, ad and sponsor free as well, and alongside my debut feature-length film, Boomers. Boomers is a film which aims to excavate the lives and legacy of the baby boomer generation, told through the medium of a road trip across the US, around Europe, and the UK. It aims to ask how we got to a place of housing crisis, climate crisis, economic crisis, many other crises, and whether the baby boomers are to blame for those or not. Over on Nebula, it joins a catalogue of fantastic shows and films by many of your favorite indie creators. It truly is a wonderful slate of stuff that we've got going on over there at the moment, and we've got more coming out all the time, including Bobby Broccoli's 17 Pages, which comes out very soon. If you'd like to sign up to Nebula, then you can do so whilst also supporting my work by using my personal link go.nebula.tv/Tom Nicholas. That link gets you 40% off an annual plan to Nebula. Using that link also helps to support my work. Not only do we get a cut of the revenue from every time you watch any of our videos in the future, but we also get a little bit of a kickback from you using my link, which really helps to make more clips like this, more main channel videos, and more exciting, ambitious project in the future too. So I'd be super grateful if you use that link, which again is go.nebula.tv/Tom Nicholas. I'll see you over on Nebula and in a future video, hopefully soon too.